This video will describe the process by which you can take data in a spreadsheet in Google Sheets and make charts from it. First thing you're going to need is some data in your chart, which generally will mean you need to do some research. In this case, I have pulled this fast food data from a sample site for education. Let's start by going through the steps. Once you have your data in your chart, before you can make a chart, you need to highlight the data that you want to include in your chart. I'm not going to be very specific yet. I'm just going to take all the data and I'm going to see what happens when I make a chart from it. Within the data, by the way, you can see some calculations by selecting a cell and looking up here at the formula bar. Some other calculations happening. So this chart includes some data and some calculation formulas. Let's go ahead and select again, and up here on the right is Insert Chart, and if you forget that, you can go to the Insert menu and choose Chart. They do the same thing. When you choose this, it'll bring you to the chart editor, and the chart editor usually begins with some recommendations, different types of charts that can be created from what you've highlighted. And out of all of these, I can see that some are more appropriate than others. I like this one a little more than some of the other ones because they're not values that are stacked on top of each other. They're next to each other. Now, including all three of these columns, calories, fat calories, and non-fat calories, is a little bit deceptive because fat calories and non-fat calories combined is where the calorie total comes from. So this is doubling up on data, so you may want to be more selective about what you include. For example, if I excluded total calories and included just fat calories, that might do the trick here. Let's go ahead and cancel this and change our selection to reflect that. So I'm still going to go ahead and select this. I'm not going to include the totals row, and I'm going to hold down the Command key on a Mac or a Control key on a Windows machine and select the fat calories and non-fat calories. So these three columns will be reflected within my chart. Let's go ahead and insert a chart, and let's go ahead. Now, recommendations was skipped this time. That's because they jump right to this as the way that it can display it. And I can see this is actually pretty nice. This area chart shows both the non-fat calories and the fat calories side by side, not totaling the two, but showing how they compare to one another separately. I kind of like this chart. Let's say that I want to go with this. I could press Insert Chart here. Ooh, I like that too. But let's stick with the original. Let's say that I want to use this chart, but notice that I have a generic chart title and no labels on my axes. The way you can affect those is to go to the Customization tab, and now I can make direct connections. So I don't know what my big picture message is for this data, but in the real world, when you've been collecting data, it's usually with a purpose, and that purpose is what your chart title should be based upon. So in this case, I'm going to just make one up. I'm going to say, watch the fat calorie intake. So I would usually use a chart in connection with a talk, and this chart should reflect a message, and that's what this hopefully will do for me. I can also make choices about how the text looks, what color it is, and you can make some decisions. I don't think I like that change. I think I'm going to switch back to black. Okay. Underneath of that, you have a choice about where the legend is, and that's this area. How big, or whether you want it to be italicized, what color its text is. I don't really need to change that. Just understand that you have an option to control those. I can do some things here like stacking and reversing and maximizing. I'm going to go ahead and reverse that. No, I'm not. I'm going to keep it just like this. Now we get, as I scroll further down, now we get down to the axis labels. The horizontal axis, meaning the one across the bottom, doesn't have a title. Let's go with something to the effect of food item. And there it is. It's in italic. It doesn't really stand out, so let's make it bold as well. That's a little easier. Now I'm going to switch the axis to the left vertical. And on this side, what is this a measure of? And this is a measure of calories. And let's also make that bold as well. Now we've got labels on the sides. Things look good. Now the next thing you might want to note is you have a minimum and maximum value. In this case, my minimum values are 0. That looks fine. But the maximum value doesn't use the whole chart. The chart goes up to 800 and my maximum value is 610. So I'm going to go ahead and set a new max of 625, something that's slightly above where we're at. Notice that I can affect the look of the chart by controlling those maximums. Although it's inappropriate here, I'm going to go ahead and set a minimum value just so you can see what it looks like. And now some of my data falls out of the chart range, so I don't want to do that. I'll go with 0 again. Alright, next up, grid lines. That refers to these. So these are guidelines that help a viewer compare what you're showing visually. So if you want to make it more granular, you could raise the value. If you wanted to, and that actually helps a little bit. Let's see what this does. Let's go with blue on that. Okay. No, I think that looks kind of bad. I'm going to switch back to a lighter gray. Okay, you can also add minor grid lines, so a combination of these two could be helpful. Let's switch the major back to every 5 on the screen and the minor to be every 10 on the screen in between. Now I can really, if I make a large chart, I can really see carefully if there's a lot of data items, what's going on here. With only relatively few data items, this is probably not necessary. So let's switch that back to 0. Alright, the number format can come from the data like this, or I could customize it. I'll stick with what the data offers. The scale. Okay, this again matches what the data set offered. I'm not going to change that now, but understand you do have control. And finally, we can say all areas of series. That means these data sets are set in a certain way. If I want to choose one of those data sets and emphasize it, I could choose, let's say, fat calories, and I'm going to make that a bright red, and I'm going to go ahead and make that a very thick line, comparatively speaking, because that way people can really be drawn to one specific part of the data. And if I want to make it more or less opaque, I can do so. I actually kind of like what they were doing before. So let's see, point size. Now I can set points to be very large, and I can control what it looks like. So I think I've taken my my chart and I've done a pretty good job with it. Let's go to non-fat calories. That's this upper line, and let's change this to be a more comfortable blue color for contrast, and it makes purple where they overlap. And I'll go ahead and choose a smaller point size for that. So what I've done is I've emphasized that there's more to be attending when it comes to the fat calories. Alright, I feel like I've done a good job. I'm going to press insert, and there is my chart. The chart can be resized. It could be placed into another document. I like it right down below, and then we can scroll down to see the detail. That's your chart process.